wind is sharp, colder than expected, and it cuts across the skin like a warning. A young man, barefoot, hunched against the chill, presses his hand against a smooth stone. It's not just any stone. It's the stone. The one he found near the river bend last winter. Hard, fine-grained, sharp enough to strip meat from bone and still fit in his palm like it was born there. His fingers twitch. He's not nervous. He's calculating. He holds the stone, tilts it, and scrapes it against a dry length of mammoth tendon. It hisses soft and steady. Sparks leap up. Not from fire yet, but from motion. Purpose. The tendon begins to curl just slightly. He grins. Dinner's one step closer to not being raw. Welcome to the Stone Age. You might not survive this, so before you enjoy the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And let me know your local time and where you're watching from, preferably not while chipping flint barefoot in the snow. Now, turn up the volume, and together let's begin today's journey of exploration. Before language, before fire, before the first bad haircut, humans had stones, not just rocks, tools. The earliest humans didn't wake up one day and think, let's start the tool age. They were just hungry, cold, exposed. And one day, probably by accident, someone picked up a sharp-edged rock and realized it cut through meat better than fingernails. Cue the world's first light bulb moment. Minus the light bulb, these first tools were called Oldowan tools, and they're as old as 2.6 million years. They weren't pretty. Think fist-sized stones, chipped crudely to create an edge. No symmetry, no polish, just brutal efficiency. They weren't used to carve monuments or sculpt statues. They were for getting things done. Smashing bones to get at marrow. Scraping hides to make primitive clothing. Cutting plants, roots, or whatever else didn't run away fast enough. And here's a strange but true detail. These early tools weren't always made where they were used. Some sites show stones transported over long distances, sometimes up to 20 kilometers. That means even back then, humans were willing to carry a really nice rock all day, probably while saying, trust me, this one's special. Now imagine using that tool in action. You're a prehistoric scavenger. You didn't kill the wildebeest, but you found it half-eaten by something else. The lion's gone, the vultures are circling, and you have minutes to act. You drop to your knees, stone in hand, and go for the thigh, cutting, pulling, scraping. Time is meat. Hesitation is starvation. That crude stone tool just became your lifeline. And these tools weren't just for feeding bellies, they were the first spark of thinking ahead. You didn't need a scraper until you had a hide. You didn't need a cutter until you had something to cut. The fact that someone kept a sharp stone tucked into their belt or under a rock told the world, I'm planning for later, and that idea, planning, was revolutionary. Of course, it wasn't all elegant slicing and strategic scavenging. There were complications. Early humans probably hurt themselves all the time. Chipping flint is no joke. Imagine trying to sharpen a rock without protective gear while sitting on dirt. One bad strike and you've invented the world's first toe amputation. Some archaeologists even joke that our ancestors probably walked around with more bandages than clean cuts. It's all fun and games until someone turns a hand axe into a hand accident. Still, the benefits outweighed the bruises. Stone tools meant faster food prep. They meant fewer teeth worn down from chewing raw meat. They meant less time exposed to predators while picking apart kills. Suddenly, humans had an edge, literally, and the balance of survival began to shift. Not overnight, not evenly, but slowly, like flint under pressure, the cracks of change started to form. What's even more impressive, tool use spread across species. Our cousins, Homo habilis, Australopithecus, and later Homo erectus, all used some form of stone tools. It wasn't just a human thing. It was a humanity thing. Some researchers believe that the very act of making tools, chipping, planning, testing, helped develop the brain. The coordination needed to strike a stone in just the right spot, without shattering it, may have fine-tuned motor skills and spatial reasoning. In a way, those scrapers weren't just shaping meat, they were shaping minds. And then there's this, we know tool use became part of ritual. Some tools were buried with the dead. Not because the afterlife needed skinning knives, but because tools were identity. Your tool was your status, your signature, like bringing your favorite kitchen knife to a cook-off, or your lucky wrench to fix a car. If someone was buried with their tools, it meant those tools mattered. They were part of the person. Imagine a teenage girl burying her father, tucking his best scraper under his folded hands. Not because it was valuable, but because it was his. Even more curious, some tools were decorated. Not with diamonds, obviously, but with etchings, grooves, and stains. Maybe to mark ownership. Maybe to show off. Maybe just because scratching a pattern on your hand axe made it feel more yours. Tool Bling Stone Age Edition. Of course, not everyone used tools the same way. In warmer climates, people focused on scraping and cutting. In colder areas where hides needed to be thicker and shelters more durable, stone hammers and choppers were more common. Form followed function, and function followed environment. That's what made the earliest tools so powerful. They weren't just inventions. They were adaptations. And once humans had tools, they started to push boundaries. They hunted bigger prey. They carved tougher hides. They defended themselves from threats that, days earlier, had made them run. A chipped rock became a reason to stand still. That was the moment the predator-prey balance began to shift. Not because humans grew bigger or faster, but because they found the right rock and knew how to hit it in just the right way. The kill had already gone cold. A mammoth half-eaten by predators lay slumped in the frost, steam long gone from its flesh. Most of the meat was stripped, but to a sharp-eyed scavenger there was still treasure buried within. Not meat, not skin, bone. To us, a leftover. To early humans, a resource. The Stone Age didn't just belong to stone. Bones, weathered, hollow, solid, flexible, offered a second frontier of toolmaking. They were nature's leftovers, yes, but also its hidden blueprint for survival. And for early humans, bones became one of their most surprising allies. At first, it was simple. Bones cracked open for marrow, one of the most calorie-dense foods available. But soon, a new realization emerged. Bone itself was a kind of tool waiting to happen. Lighter than stone, easier to shape, strong enough to dig, slice, sew, or smash, if you knew what you were doing. And so, the Bone Age quietly began within the Stone Age. Picture a hunched figure near the fire, scraping a rib bone with a shard of flint. Hours of grinding and shaping eventually reveal a tapered point. It's not elegant, but it works. A digging stick, perfect for prying up tubers, bulbs, or even grubs buried under packed dirt. Not tasty by modern standards, sure, but it beat starving to death. Soon after, the tools diversified. Bone awls, slender, needle-like fragments, helped pierce leather and hides. No more fumbling with stiff, frozen fur. With an awl and sinew, you could make clothing that actually fit, or at least didn't fall off mid-chase. And then came bone needles. Yes, actual needles, complete with tiny carved eyes for threading. Crafted from bird bones, especially from geese or cranes, light, thin, and surprisingly durable. And yes, someone in prehistory sat down with a tiny piece of hollow bird bone and thought, I bet I can poke tiny holes in mammoth skin with this. Absolute icon behavior. It wasn't just sewing that benefited. Larger bones, like femurs, were used to make clubs or smashers. Think of them like early hammers. You needed something to split marrow-rich bones? Grab another bone. Nature's toolbox was open and humans were shopping. Here's a strange, lesser-known detail: some bone tools were partially burned before shaping. The heat made the bones easier to carve or crack without shattering. Basically, prehistoric people invented bone tempering thousands of years before pottery. And while stone was better for cutting, bone was ideal for flexing. Some tools, especially fishhooks and harpoons, needed just enough give to survive the pull of a thrashing fish. So what did people use? Sharpened pieces of rib, antler tips, even tusk fragments. With enough finesse, a curved piece of bone could snag dinner from a rushing river before it even realized what happened. Antler, by the way, was the VIP of prehistoric crafting. Stronger than regular bone, slightly springy, and easy to split. From antler, they shaped spear points, wedges, sled runners, and ceremonial objects. Some cultures even carved combs and ornamental figurines, evidence that humanity wasn't just surviving. It was beginning to express. Now picture this: a small group huddled in a cave during a snowstorm. A mother carves a bone fishhook while a teenage son ties sinew thread to an antler point. Nearby, another family member grinds bone dust into a paste mixed with animal fat to help waterproof their shoes. That's not just survival. That's systems engineering, Ice Age style. And bone tools weren't just personal. They were shareable knowledge. When someone figured out how to make a better harpoon, that technique spread. When a new way to carve an awl made it last longer, others copied it. And this transmission of toolmaking? That's culture being born. We even find bone tool kits buried with individuals, bundles of tools carefully arranged, sometimes dyed with ochre or wrapped in hide. These weren't random trinkets. These were owned, maintained, valued. The prehistoric version of a toolbox and a badge of skill. Imagine a respected elder with a pouch of polished bone needles and sharpened antler scrapers. They weren't just a survivor, they were a technologist. The difference between eating and starving, warmth and frostbite, life and death could be traced back to how sharp their fishhook was. Of course, bone had its limits. Cracked. Split. It got brittle in cold weather or dry heat, which is why bone tools were often replaced, repaired, or repurposed. A snapped awl became a bead. A broken harpoon tip became a pendant. Nothing was wasted. Even failure was recycled. And just like with stone, ritual crept in. Some cultures painted or engraved their bone tools. Swirls, animal shapes, maybe even family marks. Perhaps to show ownership. Perhaps to call on good luck. Or perhaps just to say, this bone belonged to a mighty beast, and now it belongs to me. And here's where things get weirdly poetic. Humans began to treat tools made of other creatures' bones as part of their identity. Wearing the tooth of a predator you'd slain, using the bone of an animal you'd hunted, it was part practicality, part power move. One early grave reveals a hunter buried with a decorated bone blade made from a whale rib far from any known coastline. Did the whale wash ashore? Was the rib traded across hundreds of kilometers? Either way, someone saw a giant's remains and thought, I can carve something useful from this. In the end, bone tools weren't just backups to stone, they were part of the first great technological convergence. Stone for cutting, bone for shaping, wood for handles, sinew for binding. Humans didn't just adapt to nature, they started combining it. That moment, when a piece of antler was bound to a sharpened stone and tied with gut string, wasn't just tool-making. It was engineering. It was the first whisper of the machines to come. The sound is rhythmic tap-tap-crack. It echoes through the trees, sharper than birdsong, more deliberate than the wind. A figure crouches on a flat rock, tongue pressed between teeth in concentration. In one hand, a rounded stone. In the other, a piece of flint. With each precise strike, a shard falls away. Not random. Not lucky. Intentional. They are shaping the future. One flake at a time. The Stone Age didn't stay crude for long. After those early Oldowan choppers came something far more refined, Acheulean hand axes. Sleek, symmetrical, and sharp enough to make a modern bushcrafter jealous. These tools marked a massive leap in human thinking. No longer just smashing. Now planning. A flake here to shape the edge. A strike there to thin the base. Suddenly, the human brain was doing something radical, visualizing the tool before it existed. That's not just craftsmanship. That's imagination. These Acheulean axes first appeared nearly 1.7 million years ago and stuck around for over a million years. Why? Because they worked. A single hand axe could butcher, dig, slice, defend, and probably even open the world's first stubborn coconut. And here's a weird, delightful detail. Some of these tools were too perfect to have been used. Some researchers believe they were made as status symbols, mating displays, or even prehistoric flexes. Oh, you hunt mammoth? Cute. Check out the symmetry on this baby. Welcome to Tinder, Paleolithic edition. But it wasn't just axes. Around 300,000 years ago, humans began mastering flake tools, thin, razor-sharp slices struck from a prepared stone core. This was precision work. One wrong hit and the whole core shattered. But done right? You had a knife edge so fine it could shave hair, assuming anyone had time for grooming while running from cave bears. Some flake tools were used for piercing. Others for carving bone or wood. Some were hafted onto sticks to create early spears, not just thrusting tools, but thrown projectiles. That meant one thing, distance. Now humans didn't have to get quite so cozy with giant, tusked prey. It was the birth of the long game. One lesser-known but groundbreaking innovation, the levallois technique. Sounds French, and, well, it kind of is named after a site in France, but the method itself was used across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. It involved shaping a stone core in advance to control the size and shape of the flakes struck from it. In short, prehistoric people invented prefab modular tool parts. Kia would be proud. It meant less waste, faster toolmaking, and more predictability. No more hit and hope with random chunks. Now precision flakes. This technique shows up in the archaeological record long before Homo sapiens walked the earth. So yes, your clever Neanderthal neighbors were already engineering their toolkit like pros. By this point, tools were no longer just rocks, they were systems. Flake tools for detail work, cores for storage, scrapers for hides, burins for engraving, points for hunting. And if you broke one, you made another, or repurposed it. A snap knife became a scraper. A worn scraper became a wedge. Nothing wasted. Everything reshaped. But the real magic happened when tools started working together. Let's say you've just killed a deer. You'll need a pointy tool to open it, a sharper one to skin it, a different edge to separate tendons, and a scraping blade to clean the hide. That's 4 tools, each with its own purpose. You're not just a hunter anymore. You're a technological operator with a multi-tool kit on your belt. And they didn't carry this stuff randomly. Some of the earliest pouches were probably made to hold a set of tools. One dig site revealed a cluster of distinct tools all found together, each showing different wear patterns. Think of it like a Stone Age fanny pack, functional, fashionable, and slightly smelly. Now let's talk style. Tool styles varied by region, tribe, and purpose. Some groups favored chunky scrapers. Others produced thin, leaf-shaped blades so elegant they'd make a sushi chef blush. This diversity tells us that toolmaking wasn't just about survival, it was about identity. You could look at someone's tool and know where they came from, what they hunted, maybe even who taught them. Skills were passed down like family recipes. Hold the flint like this. Strike at this angle. Listen for the right sound, because yes, toolmaking had a sound. Skilled flint knappers could tell by the pitch of a strike whether a flake would fall clean. It's music. Violent, dusty music, but music nonetheless. And the tools kept evolving. From blades came microliths. Tiny, sharp fragments embedded into wood or bone to make composite tools. Think early Swiss Army knife. Instead of one big blade, you had a barbed edge of smaller pieces. More flexible. Easier to replace. Customizable. And almost certainly cursed to get stuck in your finger if handled wrong. Microliths show up in later Stone Age periods, especially among hunter-gatherer cultures who needed lightweight, versatile gear. Want a fishing spear? Insert some microliths. Building a harpoon? Same idea. Need to perforate a hide, carve wood, or do delicate surgery on your regrettable tribal tattoo? Microliths. It was around this time that humans started pushing tool materials beyond stone. Bone, antler, ivory, these became part of the toolkit. But stone remained the cornerstone. Reliable, abundant, and with enough skill, sharper than modern steel. Seriously. A properly knapped obsidian blade is so fine it can slice between cells. Some surgeons today use obsidian scalpels for ultra-precise cuts. Imagine that. A technique born in a cave still beating stainless steel in an operating room. That's the staying power of stone. And all of this, the axes, the blades, the microliths, wasn't just about the tools themselves. It was about what they made possible. Bigger hunts, safer camps, longer survival. With better tools came better food, better clothing, better odds. And something else too, confidence. Every edge was a step away from fear. Every flake carved from stone was one more way to push back against a world that, for a long time, had been trying to keep humans small. By now, toolmaking wasn't just a reaction to danger. It was a declaration. We are still here. The smell hits first, acrid, earthy, alive. Smoke curls low along the cave ceiling, chased by the flickering light of open flame. Near the fire, a figure squints through the haze, holding a lump of stone near the embers. Not to warm their hands. Not to cook meat. They're baking a weapon. The fire cracks, spits a spark, and suddenly the rock changes. A flake chips away, cleaner than before. The edge, sharper. The toolmaker leans closer. No cheer, no celebration. Just the quiet satisfaction of progress. Because now, humans aren't just making tools. They're changing the rules. Fire wasn't just the biggest aha moment of early humanity. It was also our most temperamental coworker. Useful, beautiful, dangerous, and prone to ruining your day if you looked away too long. But once early humans stopped simply fearing fire and started using it, everything began to evolve, including their tools. One of the first things fire improved was the quality of stone tools. Certain rocks, like chert or flint, respond to heat in fascinating ways. Heated slowly and carefully, their structure becomes more predictable. The stone flakes off in smoother, sharper slices. In short, thermal treatment turned good rocks into great blades. This wasn't accidental. Archaeologists have found clear evidence of deliberate heating pits. Simple, shallow holes where stones were buried under hot coals for hours before being knapped. That's patience. That's planning. And probably more than a few burned fingers in the learning process. Imagine the conversations around those early fires. Hey, did you try heating the flint first? Yeah, it split like butter. Nice. Still got all your toes? Most of them. And fire wasn't just transforming stones. It was changing bones and antlers too. Heat-hardened bone became sturdier, more flexible. Antler tips, when softened over fire, could be carved into hooks, needles, and even tiny art pieces. It was like unlocking a cheat code in nature's crafting menu. Here's a fun and lesser-known fact. Some early humans used charcoal as a polishing or abrasive agent. After shaping a tool, they'd rub it with ash or fine charcoal to smooth the edges or reduce splinters. Think of it as the first ever sandpaper, courtesy of last night's leftovers. But fire's biggest gift to toolmaking wasn't heat. It was light. For the first time, humans could work after sunset. That's more than a productivity boost. It's a cultural shift. Think about it. Firelight meant more hours to craft, more chances to teach, more time to experiment. And if you've ever sat by a campfire and found yourself suddenly very philosophical, congratulations. You're tapping into the same magic. Because fire doesn't just warm the body. It stirs the mind. Now picture a group of elders huddled near a blaze, knapping stones while children watch. Not because they're forced to, but because the fire draws them in. The shadows dance, the sparks fly, and the sound of stone on stone becomes the rhythm of learning. The tool isn't just being made, it's being passed on. And then, fire did something even more astonishing. It helped create the first composite tools. Take a sharp flint blade, a wooden shaft, some sinew, and a bit of tree resin. Heat the resin over a fire until it softens. Then use it to glue the blade into the shaft. Wrap it tight with sinew, and heat again to harden the glue. Boom! You've just made a spearhead that can punch through hide and bone, and stay together during the process. This kind of innovation didn't just require materials. It required steps. Fire became the centerpiece of multi-phase toolmaking. Melt the resin, soften the sinew, heat harden the wood. Craftsmanship now meant coordination, and every firelit workspace became a prehistoric laboratory. And yes, things occasionally went hilariously wrong. Imagine working on your carefully bound spear and setting the resin a little too close to the flame. It bubbles, then bursts into a foul, sticky fireball. The whole tool's ruined. Your friends laugh. You have resin in your eyebrows. You've just invented the first DIY disaster. But through trial and error, and probably a lot of shouting, these techniques became tradition. Entire groups developed signature styles. Curved handles, triple-wrapped bindings, multi-point spearheads. Some communities even seemed to specialize in crafting certain components, then trading them. That's right. Fire didn't just lead to better tools, it led to better economies. You make resin glue? I make obsidian blades? Let's talk. And fire itself became part of the toolkit. Burning brush to clear hunting paths. Hardening wooden spear shafts in flames. Using smoke to calm bees before stealing honey. Riskier than it sounds. Some groups even started charred wood carving, etching symbols into sticks using hot embers. Art? Memory? Who knows? But it wasn't random. There's one particularly fascinating site where tools were found near large, blackened stones burnt so many times they cracked like eggshells. These weren't cooking rocks. They were heat stones, possibly used to warm and shape bone or antler. That's thermal engineering, tens of thousands of years before metallurgy. And all of this was just the beginning, because fire didn't just teach humans how to shape tools. It taught them how to shape time. A spear made quickly might snap in battle. A blade rushed to finish might dull too fast. But with fire, you waited. You controlled. You paced yourself. Fire trained humans to think in processes, not impulses. And that lesson, embedded in every tool they made, echoed forward into everything from pottery to metalworking. Even today, we use fire to make our sharpest tools, surgical steel, tempered blades, forged parts. But our ancestors? They figured out the principle long before we added electricity to the mix, because deep in a dark cave, tens of thousands of years ago, someone watched a stone crack more cleanly after heating it. They smiled, whispered something to the person beside them, passed the trick down the line, and that moment, it lit more than a fire. It sparked a future. The cave is quiet now, save for the scraping of stone against stone. An older woman leans over her work, her fingers moving with the calm precision of someone who has done this for decades. Her granddaughter watches, wide-eyed, holding a rough shard of flint. It's her first lesson, not in hunting or cooking or gathering, but in remembering, because by now, tools weren't just extensions of the hand. They were extensions of memory. The final transformation of early tools wasn't about form, it was about meaning. After centuries of chipping, shaping, heating, and testing, tools were no longer just things humans made. They were how humans remembered who they were. By the late Stone Age, every tool told a story. A blade wasn't just sharp, it was personal. Passed from a mother to her child. Inherited from an uncle. Buried with an elder. It carried a history. A lineage. You didn't just sharpen it, you respected it. And while that sounds sentimental, it was also practical. Because tool-making was one of the first forms of knowledge preservation. Before writing, before books, before YouTube tutorials, there was your grandfather's favorite scraper and the way he always chipped it just so. You learned by watching. By failing. By mimicking. And over time, those lessons became tradition. In some regions, entire groups began to specialize not just in using tools, but in making them for others. Toolmakers, flint knappers, bone carvers, resin mixers, the world's first engineers, craftspersons, and, let's be honest, early tech support. Oh, your spear broke again? Let me take a look. Did you heat the resin before wrapping? No? There's your problem. Some of these tools were simple. Others were breathtaking. Blades carved with symbolic notches. Polished axes buried in ceremonial pits. Tiny figurines made of ivory or bone, sometimes holding miniature tools. Objects that seem less about function and more about feeling. Ritual. Legacy. One striking discovery. A cave in what is now France revealed dozens of flint tools deliberately arranged in a spiral, unused, pristine. Were they offerings? Teaching aids? The world's first organized tool drawer? No one knows. But clearly, they meant something. By now, humans had begun to move beyond survival. They were creating tools that expressed culture. And as tools got more refined, so did the methods for using them. You didn't just jab a spear at a bison anymore, you threw it with a spear thrower or atlatl, giving it greater range and force. The tools had tools. That's technological recursion, baby. And what about bows and arrows? One of humanity's greatest inventions, born sometime in the late Paleolithic. Tiny, perfectly shaped flint or bone points, hafted to feathered shafts, loosed from wooden bows. Suddenly, humans could hunt at long range. Quietly, repeatedly, the balance had shifted. Permanently, and with that shift came storytelling. Carvings began to appear not just on cave walls but on tools themselves. Some blades were marked with tally lines, possibly for tracking kills or time. Some bone tools bore symbols, maybe names or tributes to ancestors. Others featured abstract patterns that seem, frankly, a little artsy. Someone out there made a scraper look fancy for no other reason than it felt right. Let's not overlook that, because when someone spends hours decorating a blade that's already functional, what they're doing is remembering out loud. Carving their thoughts into the very tools that shape their lives. And that's what separated humanity from the world they once feared. Memory turned to meaning. Even in death, tools followed. Burials included flint daggers, antler carvings, and stone beads. These weren't just grave goods. They were declarations. This was who I was. This is what I did. You can almost imagine an old hunter, nearing the end of his life, handing a worn axe to his son. Not because it was the sharpest, but because it had been there. When the mammoth fell. When the shelter was built. When the first fire was lit under a stormy sky. But tools didn't just preserve identity. They built connections. With tools came trade. Tribes began exchanging blades, scrapers, pigments, and resin. And wherever these objects went, stories traveled with them. A flint blade from hundreds of kilometers away might arrive in a new valley, not just as a cutting tool, but as a symbol of friendship, or warning, or curiosity. What began as utility became communication. Here's a strange but true fact. Some sites show tools buried where no humans seem to have lived. Offering sites, perhaps? Waypoints? Territory markers? Prehistoric humans may have left tools behind as a way of saying, we were here, we mattered. And eventually, tools began to shape not just the world around humans, but the way humans thought. Cognitive scientists today believe that toolmaking changed our brains. The fine motor skills, the problem solving, the spatial reasoning, the ability to imagine a finished object before it existed. All of these sharpened our minds like flint edges. In short, tools didn't just help humans evolve. They caused us to evolve. Even now, traces of that legacy remain. The way your hands remember how to use scissors, or how you naturally orient a kitchen knife, or even how you hold a pencil, all echoes of a time when survival depended on those gestures. And perhaps that's the most humbling part, because no matter how high-tech our tools become, no matter how sharp our carbon blades or smart our devices, we're still following the same instinct: to craft, to remember, to shape the world around us with our hands. From blood and bone to obsidian and ash, from hand axes to hard drives, the tools changed. But the makers? We've been here all along.